How a murder saved my life was done. This time I meant it. There were several times in my life where I found myself considering it, contemplating taking my trip to the other side. Last time I had called the suicide hotline and eventually decided to give life one more try. Not this time. I felt completely at peace about it. This time I was truly ready to die. I felt the scratchy fiber around my neck after slipping the rope over my head. The forever necklace. I thought in a dark little joke just for myself. The rope was tied to a metal loop that was drilled into the ceiling to be sure that I would not fail. I have never been so determined to accomplish anything in my life the way I was today. The old wooden chair I stood on creaked and groaned, a moan for protest as I lift my foot ready to step off the air. One deep breath, and I could let it all go. Then someone knocked my door. I froze in exactly that position, one foot on the chair and one foot off, wondering with a sudden twinge of anger who the hell could be knocking on the door. I spent every last dollar I had to rent this remote cabin where I could spend my last weekend in beauty and peace. The intrusive sound boomed again through the empty house, obliterating my illusion of peace. I slipped the rope off my neck with irritation and watched it swing back and forth. Don't go anywhere. Now we're not done, I told the rope. Before stepping off the chair and heading down the stairs ready to berate an inconsiderate person who ruined my nearly perfect moment. After squinting through the peephole of the solid wooden door, I could see a grainly man wearing a black hoodie with the hood pulled up tightly over his head, a sharp black beard with specked gray poked through the hood, and I could see a pointed pale nose, but otherwise his features were largely hidden. The man was looking down, but swayed side to side on his feet impatiently, sending another spark of irritation through my clenched jaw. He knocked again, louder this time. I pulled the squeaky cabin door open again, against my better judgment, but he didn't seem to be leaving on his own. My sudden anger took control of my arm, which reached forward and pulled the door open. "What do you want?" I asked rudely, not even considering the normal pleasantries. "Good evening, sir," the stranger said, a little too nicely. As he lifted his head, I could see that he had black combed hair matching with his fairly well-groomed beard. A bit of gray mixed in with the dark black, a little dash of salt and pepper, if you will. "My car broke down about a mile down dirt road, and I was wondering if I could use your phone." The man felt like a used car salesman with his fake, almost painted on smile and voice that sounded rehearsed. "I don't have a phone," I told him coldly. It was a lie, of course. While my phone had no service, there was a functioning wall-mounted phone on the kitchen. The older type, with a coiled cord connected to the wall mount. "Oh, I'm sure you have a phone. All the cabinets up here do," he told me with his wide, aggravating smile. Not this one, I told him shortly, ending the conversation and wanting him gone. I started shutting the door when he stuck his foot in the doorway, preventing me from shutting the door all the way. It'll only take 30 seconds, then I'll be gone. Anger spiked in me when he blocked the door with his foot, and then I thought about slamming his foot with the door instead. And without even giving him a response, I pushed him away from the door and slammed it shut. I heard the click of the deadbolt before I even knew I was locking it. I stood there for a minute, bewildered by the event. A twinge of guilt struck my gut. I felt maybe I should have helped him. The timing was poor, sure, but how was I supposed to know my grand plans? But at the same time, why should I help the guy anyway? Nobody had ever lent me a helping hand when I needed it. That's just how this cruel world works. Nobody gives a shit and who puts their foot in someone's door. After staring at the door for some time, maybe a minute, maybe 15, I walked back upstairs and peered out through the window to make sure I was alone. He was gone, but I haven't seen him leave. A strange uneasiness crept over me. Things weren't going how they were supposed to go. Things weren't going how they were supposed to do. I checked all the windows looking for the weirdo. Nothing. So I made some quick tea. One last cup of tea sounded nice. I pushed the strange encounter out of my head. It was time to find my peace again. I realized that the sun was now starting to set over the nearby mountain peak. Why not watch it? This would be my last sunset. It sure was a stunning one. I pulled a cozy recliner chair to the large upstairs window. Brilliant colors of orange and pink now filled the sky. The clouds were broken up, creating an appearance of a large, beautiful pathway over the horizon. It struck me that there it was. My beautiful pathway to the afterlife had presented itself, and it was time. It was time to take the path laid before me. I thought that maybe this was a sign that this was exactly where I was supposed to be. I realized I was standing back on the chair but didn't remember deciding to get back up there. I once again placed the rope over my head, already positioned so that I was facing the sunset. At that moment, I was completely at peace with my death. I started to take a step, and then there was a knocking at the door. This wasn't a customary 3 or 4 knocks followed by waiting that had invaded my peace before. This was loud, panic knocking that startled me so badly that I almost fell off my chair. It seemed ironic, but I was about to willingly step off the chair, but the next moment I was fighting off balance not to fall. The loud knocking continued once again. My beautiful, peaceful moment had been shattered. I removed the rope and went over to the opposite side of the window to see who the hell had screwed everything up. This time, it was not the hooded weirdo standing at the door. It was a girl. She had long, dark hair and appeared to be about my age, maybe a little younger. And she was terrified, crying and panicked, knocking repeatedly and taking constant looks back over her shoulder. This time, I wasn't overcome with anger, but with a deep concern as I ran down the stairs to the door. As I approached the door, I could hear her pleading for help, still pounding on the door. The second I opened the door, she pushed herself in, slamming the door behind her and locking it. I started asking, but before I could finish my question, she slammed me into so unexpectedly. I let out of, ugh. But to my surprise, she pulled me into a tight embrace. Never in my life I have felt anybody hug me as tightly as this crying girl was squeezing me right now. I hugged her back, squeezing her just as tight. What's wrong? I asked with genuine concern. As I blew her hair off my face, she pulled back and looked me in the eye. I couldn't help but notice that even though her tears and fear-stricken face was absolutely beautiful, her long dark hair complemented those beautiful green eyes in a perfect sort of way that reminded me of the sunset. They were a shade of green that I had never seen before, almost as if it was a new color that has not been discovered until this girl was born. For a moment, I lost myself in her eyes before the exasperating reality slapped me back into the situation at hand. He killed her. He killed Jess. Confusion quickly turned into a pit deep in my stomach at what she said. What? Who? Who's Jess? I asked her, still holding her tightly. He came to the door. She started barely getting the words out through her sobs and deep breaths. He asked to use the phone, so I let him in, but he had a knife, and the girl burst into uncomfortable sobs and buried her face into my shoulders. She didn't finish, but she didn't need to. The truth of the situation crashed down on me. The same guy who knocked on my door earlier had visited another cabin, and this woman had watched her friend stabbed to death. I wanted to panic the same way as she was, but knew with certainty that she needed to stay calm, or at least seem calm. I quickly walked her into the kitchen, grabbed the phone with my hands so shaky I nearly dropped it, and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Yeah, my name is Dean Johnson. There's been a murder. I felt weird to say, and a weird fear struck me that maybe the voice on the phone couldn't believe me. What's your address, sir? The quick professional voice responded. I gave her the address of the cabin I was staying at. Thankfully, it was on a card by the landline phone. I asked the girl for the address where the murder happened. She didn't know, but she managed to tell the operator that her name was Sarah, and the victim's name, as well as her description of the killer. Okay, sir. Please lock the doors and stay inside. The emergency response will be there in about 30 minutes. The phone lady told me in a matter-of-fact tone, as if it was a normal Tuesday call on IT. 30 minutes? What do you mean 30 minutes? I asked with a deep exasperation. There's a murder on the loose. I'm sorry, sir. The closest law enforcement to you. You're in a remote area. In those last words, I could finally hear a tone of emotion, a sadness that she couldn't help. Before I could respond, there was a loud knock at the door, making us both jump. Sarah cried out loudly, and I dropped the phone, I signaled to her with a single finger placed over my lips, knowing full well that whoever was at the door would have already heard her cry out, and quietly I walked to the door and nervously looked through the peephole. My heart slammed into my gut as the sight of the man who stood on the porch. It was him, the hooded car salesman asshole, but now his face and beard were splattered with blood. I need to borrow your phone, the man yelled in an unhinged sing-song tone. His face, nice, had been replaced with a maniac and insane tone, matching the crazed look in his eyes. Boom! He kicked the door hard, shaking the door, but it held strong. I ran to the kitchen to grab my own knife. Sarah was already holding one. Boom! There was another kick. We stood there terrified, and not knowing what to do, I braced for another boom. But there wasn't one. It was silent. You go upstairs, I told Sarah decisively. I'll stay down here just in case. I had come out here willingly and prepared to meet death. Sarah, I didn't deserve that though. I had only just met her, but I felt genuine desire to protect her. And if this is how I went, at least my death had meaning now. I was fine with death, but if he came in, I could at least try to take him out with me. Sarah nodded, her eyes widened and shocked as she headed upstairs. Just as she crossed the final step, the window of the sliding glass back door exploded as a large rock blasted through. I ducked instinctively as shards of glass rained down on me and looked back up to see the man climbing through the large broken window, smiling with an expression of adrenalized mania. I grabbed an ugly vase off the nearby end table and threw it out at him. Grunting with every ounce of strength I could summon, I missed terribly. To his left, shattered on the cabinet to his right. With the knife still in my hand, picked up a wooden chair with it and charged at him with bravery and confidence I've never felt before. The chair legs hit him square in the chest and face, catching him off guard, but it felt like hitting a brick wall. The recoil of the collision pushed the chair back into my chin, and we both were knocked to the ground. I looked over to see him already getting up, but within distance, so I slashed at him with my knife. Aiming for the neck, I missed again, but still slashing through his face, sending a splatter of blood, but he barely flinched. He immediately slashed right back at me, putting deep cuts into my upper chest. I rolled backwards, struggling in a panic frenzy, trying to get on my feet. Before I was up to my feet, the chair hit me hard in the face and knocked me back to the ground. I staggered back up to my feet despite the black spots from the hit on my head. Nothing, the taste of blood in my mouth, while slashed past my throat, narrowing, missing me. I started punching and slashing wildly, in a frenzy, overcome with unfamiliar rage that perhaps had been waiting for years to be freed. I admit that I don't know how to fight. I'd honestly never needed to before, but something was working. I connected at least once more. with the knife slicing a fresh wound on his shoulder. He was backing up and then naturally I tripped. My knife clattered on the hardwood floor. I rose to my knees, reaching for the knife, but it was knocked down from a hard kick to the side. Every last molecule of oxygen in my lungs was expelled from my body with that disgusting grunt. I tried to breathe and regain myself, but only found an excruciating sharp pain in my ribs from where I was kicked. The man stood over me, a triumphant sneer on his face, ready to bring the knife down on me. Suddenly, I didn't want to die anymore. As the man started to bring the knife down, a chair crashed into his upper back, and his head splintered with impact. He cried out in a fury as the knife fell from his hand, and he fell to his knees while I rolled away. To lengthen the distance, I saw Sarah's wide-eyed face looking down over the loft banister. She had thrown the chair that had kept me from getting stabbed right there on the floor. It was the chair I had been standing on when Sarah arrived. "You fucking bitch," the man yelled out, already back on his feet and armed. He started running to the stairs with his knife hand. Sarah was screaming as he seemed to forget about me and set his predatory sight on her. Her scream sparked a new sense of urgent adrenaline, and I found myself picking up my knife and running after it, despite the pain. Sarah was backed into a corner, holding her large kitchen knife in front of her, in both fear and bold defiance, while the intruder looked for his opportunity to make his move. He slashed at her, missing short, but causing her to flinch badly. Before he could take a follow-up shot, I slammed the knife square into his upper back. The blade penetrated the right of his spine with a dull sound, accompanied by a horrific crack that must have been a rib giving away. The man collapsed to his knees while I pushed into the handle of the knife, trying to drive it deeper. He let out a roar of pure rage and pushed back against me. I tried to drive him into the ground, but he was stronger than I, even with the knife in his back, and I was able to struggle to his feet. While this was happening, I saw Sarah running through the door with the rope. Instantly, I understood her plan. I wrapped my arms around his waist, and arms clasping my hands in front to trap his arms at his sides. I squeezed as tight as I possibly could as Sarah slipped the noose over his head. He was fighting violently now, and I struggled to restrain him. I held on as tight as I could, but the grip of my hands were starting to slip. Sarah was hurriedly trying the other end of the rope, tying the other end of the rope to the banister with shaky hands. With a sudden burst of strength, my grip failed, and the killer broke his arms free and lunged at Sarah. I charged at him, putting my shoulder into his side like a regular rugby player, pushing him towards the banister. Sarah jumped into the fight as well, throwing her weight onto him. Together, We put all the remaining energy we had into the one final push, knocking the killer over the banister and off the loft. The rope, the rope caught with an audible crack. His fall was broken, as was his neck. Both of our knots had held. The body swayed gently over the living room, suspended by a noose tied to the banister by a noose. Sarah and I sat outside waiting for the police to arrive. We walked out there, or rather, she awkwardly helped me. After the moment was done, all of the physical pain came crashing into me at once. She was holding a bathroom towel over the deep cut on my chest, which was bleeding profusely and soaking my once white t-shirt in crimson. As the cool what? Oh. As the cool, mountainous air started bringing my body temperature to a reasonable level, she broke the awkward silence, addressing the elephant in the room. The elephant being the noose that had been hanging in the bedroom. Were you going to? Yes, I admitted. Looking at my knees, I didn't need her to finish the question. I knew what she meant. Sarah gently grasped my chin and pulled it up. Please don't, she told me, into my eyes. I once again saw in her teary eyes just how beautiful she was. The most beautiful person I have ever seen. I won't. I promise, surprised to hear the words from my lips, with tears now finding their way down my face. And I meant it. That was just over 18 months ago. Now, I'm happy to tell you that I'm still here. But the story isn't just the story of how I didn't kill myself, but also the story of how I met the love of my life. How we were bonded through mutually assured survival. We saved each other, but she saved me in more ways than one. We are celebrating our honeymoon now at a beautiful beach house overlooking the ocean. We chose a location as far from the woods as possible. We are still healing, but we are healing together. Sarah is healing from the trauma of her best friend Jessica being murdered. I am healing from years of personal neglect and self-destructive behavior. I didn't realize how broken I truly was until I met Sarah. And you can't fix what you don't acknowledge to be broken. As I sit here now, under the most beautiful sunset I have ever seen, that fateful day, I finally realized what I was missing in my life. What was missing was not just the feeling of being loved, but having somebody to love. Cool. Okay. Bye.